Howdy, Full Metal Cowboy, straight shooting a review of the anime Death Note. This is an anime adaptation of the manga of the same name, illustrated by Takeshi Obata and written by Tsugumi Oba. The studio behind the anime adaptation is Madhouse. Back in October, I reviewed the anime series Monster, another production by Madhouse. And just like Death Note, it too was based on a manga. And I did make note in my review of Monster that it was extremely faithful to the source material, the original manga by Naoki Urasawa. Well, Death Note is another Madhouse production that is extremely faithful to its source material. The only difference that the manga and anime really have is how it ends. Death Note happens to be the directorial debut for Tetsuro Araki, who would later direct animes such as High School of the Dead, Guilty Crown, and Season 1 of the smash hit anime series Attack on Titan. He also did direct Season 2 of Attack on Titan as well, but he had the role of chief director. There was another director that did the direction for Season 2 as well. So what is Death Note about? Well, it focuses on a student named Light Yagami, who happens to have very good grades. And he happens to be quite bored at the start of the series. And one day in class, he sees a notebook falling from the sky. After class, Light goes to where the notebook fell, picks it up, and it's simply titled Death Note. He opens it and discovers the rules of the Death Note. One day, he decides to test the Death Note out by writing someone's name in the notebook. After about 40 seconds after writing someone's name, that person died of a heart attack. And after he uses the notebook, he meets a Shinigami named Ryuk, who happened to be the one that dropped the notebook. After realizing the power that the Death Note holds, Light declares that he will be the god of the new world. Given that Death Note is a Madhouse production, I'm not surprised the animation looks great for something that came out in the mid-2000s. Madhouse has quite the reputation for quality animation with their titles, especially for television productions. Death Note is also quite flashy, and I think that adds to the excitement for most of the entire series. Madhouse did not disappoint with this entire production. I do have issues with Death Note, but that's not Madhouse's fault. Death Note can be flashy at times, but it can also feel epic as well, all thanks to the music by Hideki Taniguchi and Yoshihisa Hirano. This is a great soundtrack from beginning to end, within the series and outside the series. And if I ever find an actual physical copy of this soundtrack and it's within a reasonable price, I might just consider owning it because I actually really like the music after all this time. And of course I gotta talk about the opening and closing themes of Death Note. The first opening is very memorable. Can't go wrong with it. The first closing theme is a good way to end an episode. That is until after episode 19, where the opening and closing change to more hardcore songs, especially the second opening. Holy shit! This was a badass opening! And the second closing theme is just as kick-ass as the second opening theme. Now, looking back on Death Note as a whole in the anime series, I think they could have started using the second opening and second closing themes starting with episode 26 to represent the second arc in Death Note after 25 episodes with the first arc. But whatever. When it comes to voice acting, the original Japanese cast is excellent. It features Mamoru Miyano as Light Yagami, and this is easily one of the best performances I've heard from Mamoru Miyano. L is voiced by Kappei Yamaguchi, and I actually really have grown to like his performance in the original Japanese version of Death Note. The only one that does not stick out to me as well as the others is Aya Hirano as Misa Amane. My apologies for the sudden brightness at this point. My battery died while I was filming this review. Ain't that fun? As I was saying, I don't think Aya Hirano's performance was terrible. I just found her a little too eccentric as Misa Amane. And whenever I look at the character and hear her voice, it just does not click with me. Now, part of this had to do with the fact that I watched Death Note dubbed first. Had I watched it subtitled first, maybe my impression on Aya Hirano as Misa Amane would have been slightly different, but even if I have seen both subtitled and dubbed, I don't really find Aya Hirano's performance as Misa Amane that strong in comparison to the English dub of Death Note in regards to Misa Amane. More on it in just a bit. The rest of the Japanese cast is great, and you cannot go wrong with either subtitled or dubbed when it comes to Death Note, because the English dub is also very good. I would even go as to say it is one of the best English dubs I have heard in my life. In the English dub, Light Yagami is voiced by Brad Swaile, and this is easily one of his most memorable performances in his voice acting career. Hands down. And this is easily Brad Swaile at some of his best. Out of all the cast members in the English dub of Death Note, the casting of L was quite the fascinating one, as everyone else has had experience in voice acting in Western cartoons and or anime. As for the voice of L in the English dub, Alessandro Giuliani, he has had very few anime roles, but he is actually better known as Felix Gaida in the 2004 reimagining of Battlestar Galactica. Yeah, that guy! He voices L! This casting choice paid off immensely for the English dub of Death Note, and as a result, I find Alessandro Giuliani to be the stand-up performance in the English dub of Death Note, because from beginning to end, he just perfectly captured the kind of character L should sound for an English dub of Death Note. Just like Alessandro Giuliani, there is another cast member that did not have much experience in anime roles at the time of the recording of Death Note's English dub, and that is Shannon Chan Kent, who voices Misa Amane in the English dub of Death Note. And her voice was easy for me to click with when it comes to Misa Amane, much more than Aya Hirano in the original Japanese cast. Although, at the end of the day, I found Aya Hirano tolerable. I just quickly loved Shannon Chan Kent's voice more when I was getting into Death Note for the first time. Now, there is a moment much later in the anime series that I'm willing to drop a light spoiler on because it actually does not give anything big away, but it is a scene that did stick out throughout the entire run, and this is known as Misa's Song. Now, of course, Aya Hirano is known for her singing as well as her voice acting, and it doesn't surprise me that Aya Hirano's delivery with Misa's Song is excellent. But, watching the English dub, Shannon Chan Kent proves that she's also a great singer as well, and the English dubbed version of the song is excellent as well. Shannon Chan Kent would also later be the singing voice for Pinkie Pie in My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Now, while that is completely unrelated to Death Note as a whole, it does actually show that Shannon Chan Kent is actually a pretty great singer when it comes to animated productions. And that's coming from me, who was never really a fan of the songs in My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, but I always found Pinkie Pie to have a standout singing voice amongst the rest. And the reason I address it is because I am familiar with her singing role in My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, but it does go to show you that she is good at voice acting and singing. That's nice. About Ryuk, there is one thing that he and I have in common. We love apples. No, really, I actually do like apples myself. And about Ryuk, there is one thing that he and I have in common. We love apples. I'm serious, I actually do like apples myself, and I happen to live in the state of Washington, where apples are quite the staple. I'm serious. But good thing Ryuk and all the Shinigami are fictional characters, because if they actually existed, there'd probably be an apple shortage, and that would not be fun. Because Ryuk is such a pig when it comes to apples. The man behind the English dub of Death Note is Carl Willems, who is also known for his English dub of Inuyasha, which is actually a dub I actually prefer over the original Japanese version. What makes Death Note quite the anime to watch are its characters, more specifically and importantly, Light Yagami and L, because there is this cat and mouse game between the battle of two wits. And that's actually the best thing about Death Note, seeing how these two operate side by side. Although I do think that Reinhard von Lohengramm and Jan Wenli of Legend of the Galactic Heroes is the greatest rivalry in anime history. Now, the rest of the characters, for the most part, are great as supporting characters. And there's other characters that people know and probably love too, but that's on a later point of Death Note. Throughout its 37 episode run, Death Note has two story arcs. The first one lasting 25 episodes, a little over 2/3 of the entire anime series. And Death Note is a masterpiece of an anime. If only that second arc never happened. So how did Death Note go from masterpiece to an anime to masterpiece status revoked? Well, that's because there are new characters introduced in the second arc that I don't even find that interesting. In fact, they rehash character traits of a previous established character. And that just felt cheap to me. Had Madhouse taken the liberty of omitting the second arc from the manga and make episode 26 the final episode, serving as an epilogue to what has been told throughout the previous 25 episodes, maybe, just maybe, the Death Note anime could have been a 10 out of 10 for me. But since Madhouse was staying faithful to the original manga, which contained the second arc, that is why I can't give the Death Note anime a 10 out of 10. And it's pretty obvious I won't give the manga a 10 either. But, to be fair, the second arc did have its moments, and they did shine. I would go as far as to say there is a part midway into the second arc and the ending are the areas that I think the second arc is actually very nice to watch. It's just, there are certain areas that are just not as strong as what the first arc already had. And that is where I have my issues with that second arc. But again, it is those specific new characters that come in the second arc that I just did not care for in comparison to other characters that have already been established through 2/3 of the series. At the end of the day, I still greatly enjoy Death Note after all this time. For an anime that was made in the 2000s, it still holds up. And I still think this is one of the stand-up titles of that decade. And I do think 2/3 of Death Note is a masterpiece with that first arc all on its own. Death Note was so high for me only to fumbled at the start of its second arc, having moments that are worth sitting through the second arc, and there is a satisfactory ending for the most part. At least for the story that Death Note is going for, because I did get some satisfaction out of how the series ended. For the most part, I found it fitting. It's just that it's part of the second arc. If you are an anime fan, chances are you have already seen Death Note. But if for whatever reason you have not seen Death Note yet, what are you waiting for? This is actually a title from the 2000s that stands out for the most part. 2/3 of it is excellent, and I think you might like it. But if you are a newcomer to anime, I highly recommend Death Note. Now, why am I giving newcomer anime fans the higher recommendation? Because I think Death Note would work as a gateway to anime for newcomers. I do think those early episodes of Death Note are going to hook newcomers right into the excellence of Death Note throughout 2/3 of this series. But as for the enjoyment of that last third, that's definitely going to vary depending on the viewer. I was able to tolerate it, but I'm not denying it was not on par with that first arc. I know I keep repeating that same point, but it bears repeating because, again, 2/3 of this anime is amazing, but that last third falls short from the same quality that 2/3 of the anime had. If anything I said in this review piqued your interest, make a note on your watch list to try out Death Note. I'm going to be shooting an 8.5 out of 10 for Death Note. And that's my review of Death Note. I'll be reloading for my next review, so until then, see you later.